Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Prog Report Top 5 podcast. We're getting ready to close out 2018, and we're squeezing in one more podcast. If you haven't listened to any of the past ones, you can catch up on progreport.com. You can also listen to them on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or Podbean. Some are also available on YouTube. And of course, don't forget about Prog Report Radio and Prog Report on Facebook and Twitter. So we're everywhere, and you can find us at anywhere online that you visit. And we hope you've enjoyed the year. We certainly have had a great time, lots of great guests. And we're going to wrap it up with one more great one in anticipation for the upcoming Cruise to the Edge and the 50th anniversary of this fantastic band. And while we did do Yes Top 5 albums, we are going to go ahead and do the Yes Top 5 songs, which is a much more daunting task with all the great songs by this Hall of Fame legendary band. To only pick 5 from all the eras and all the lineups is going to be difficult. And so we want you to play along. Please send us your top 5 as well. We have some great guests. We have 2 guys that are really well-versed in Yes, probably qualify as experts in the band. So we are going to bring them along. So our first guest is somebody you know very well from his Yes Years 50 podcast on our podcast network, and he's been on a bunch of other podcasts, the Fantasy Draft and our Best Albums of 2018, and he's become quite the regular all the way from Northern Ireland. So please welcome Geoff Bailie once again.
Hello.
Thanks, Geoff, for doing this again.
You're
and we're really excited once again to have somebody who I guess loves being on these podcasts with us and given his lists, and it's always an honor when he's able to free himself and join us from his busy schedule. So let's welcome the ever busy Mike Portnoy back to the show.
Hey, the list master general.
That's right. Well, thanks, Mike, once again. It's always a pleasure to have you, man. And everybody knows quite the Yes fan that you are. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And of course, with the cruise coming up and you being really one of the, ringmasters of these cruises of late, this was a perfect fit and made a lot of sense to do. Of course, we're running a contest. This podcast is in line with the contest, but by the time many hear this, a few weeks or a month later from now, that contest is way over and you missed out. So sorry about that. But if you're listening to this in time and it's still 2018, then you have a lot to pay attention to. And there's more information on Prog Report website on all of that. So before we get started on our Yes Top 5 songs that we're all going to pick, of course, we like to interview our special guest. Mike, you have a lot of stuff going on. A couple of singles are out from the new Neal Morse Band album, The Great Adventure, which comes out in January. What's going on with that album? What can you tell us about it?
Well, I think the cat's out of the bag. It's another double concept album. It's I don't know if I use the word sequel or companion to Similitudes, but it's definitely a continuation of that world. So it's a mammoth, epic adventure, and the 2 singles that have come out so far, kind of, a little more mainstream commercial. I guess that's the way you always have to roll with these singles. Even with Similitude, we came out with City of Destruction and
So Far Gone.
Yeah. So the way I look at when you have a concept album, these are more like like commercials or or trailers. With Tommy, you can't judge all of Tommy from Pinball Wizard, or you can't just judge all of The Wall from Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. They're kind of just like little excerpts of a much, much bigger picture. And it's the same with these. But we're going to probably have a few more singles out before the album comes out in January, just to give little tasters and teasers. But the real experience is going to be listening to that album from start to finish and enjoying the journey.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of already listening to this. Geoff has as well. And I mean, again, you guys have to do yourselves every time with these things. I don't want to give too much away. I hate kind of doing that, but there is a lot more to it, obviously, than the singles. It's a little bit heavier at times than the last one. I think that's as much as I really want to maybe say about it. But do you agree with that? It's a little bit more chunky.
I guess I don't really think about these things, to be honest. It kind of just comes out, and when you have like a double album, you try to have a little balance of everything. But yeah, there are definitely heavier moments, and Welcome to the World 2 is pretty heavy and shreddy, and I think it's a matter of just wanting to utilize Eric, not only vocally and not only in terms of the writing, but in terms of his his shredding abilities as well. But once again, like Similitude, it was a full band effort and just something I could not be prouder of. It really is just one of the highlights of my career. Once again, I don't want to go on the record saying that again, because so much was made of me saying that last time, that this time around I'm just kind of tiptoeing around my personal thoughts. But really, I think it can be held side by side with Similitude, which I think is saying a lot.
Yeah.
Mike, in terms of the album, I suppose if we read the credits, we see Mike Portnoy drums and vocals. What else is it that Mike Portnoy brings to a Neal Morse Band album? Are there things you could point to in this album where you go, well, you see that was my bit that isn't just playing the drums?
I mean, I could probably do that honestly with every album I've ever made. Some bands more than others, but in the Neal Morse Band, my contributions are usually that of an arranger. Obviously you have such prolific writers like Neal, and Bill is also a well of ideas as well. When you have guys like that in the band, my role is usually not to sit there and come up with riffs. My role is to kind of sit there and sort through all of these ideas and come in with the notes and come in prepared, the way I guess a co-producer would. I'm usually the one doing the homework, making the notes, and coming in and saying, hey, remember that one, the Genesis thing that Bill had? That would be great if we mix it together with this new riff that we just came up right here, And I think Neal's always the first to give me that credit. He calls me the gleaner. When you have Neal contributing hours and hours of music, somebody's got to sit there and have an idea of what's there and what's on the table and how to utilize it. And I think that's my strongest role.
It's kind of like the movie editor, right? Who takes all the stuff they film and then makes a movie out of it.
Yeah, very, very much so.
Is the key to these albums that one central theme? Do you, through all the music, after you write all of it and you're doing all the lyrics, you stumble upon this love that never dies hook? And is that, then you go, okay, that's it. This is the theme. Now we know, and then you build around that. Is that where things start with these things?
That's where they start, but the problem, and it's a great problem to have, but the problem with this band is there's never one main theme. There's usually about 5 or 6 of them. And, it's a great problem to have, but usually we find ourselves with these albums having literally, 4, 5, 6 different themes that are all so strong. So over the course of a double album, you could twist and turn them and put them in different keys and put them in different time signatures and have one played fast and one played slow. And that's kind of the way you write. And we learned that from the masters like Genesis and Yes, and the bands that were doing that in the early days of prog. But that's like the key. That's prog writing 101.
Right.
And that's the thing, and not only are we able to utilize, in this case, all of the incredible themes that we were writing for this album, but because it was a continuation of Similitude, we also had a handful of themes that we wanted to bring back from that album as well. So when you listen to this album from start to finish, you're not only getting a brand new, almost 2-hour experience, you're also getting it sprinkled with flashbacks to the previous album.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. And I did the same thing with Similitude, and I did the same thing with this one. When I first got it, I clear everybody away and I sit myself in a room for 2 hours, because you can't be disturbed when you're first listening to these. At least that's how I do it.
It should be treated like watching a movie. You don't want to watch a great movie, while you're doing the dishes. You want to sit down and enjoy it. And an album like this should absolutely be treated that way as well.
You also have, you just came back rather from Flying Colors sessions, which is really exciting because, sometimes these super groups, they're one and dones, maybe twice and dones, but you're looking at a third album here, which doesn't happen a lot with a band like that.
Right.
So that's really exciting. What can you tell us about the sessions and what made it all happen again?
Well, you bring up a good point. I think 3 is always the magic number with these supergroups, because anybody could do one. And then usually there's a lot of excitement from the first, so you get together to do a second, see if you can do it again. But the real key is the bands that could do a third. And so Flying Colors have finally crossed that line. But yeah, what can I tell you? It's such a magical band, such a special band. The combination of personalities and musical styles that go into the melting pot with this band are incredible. Obviously you have me and Neal are kind of like team Mike and Neal, and then you have Steve and Dave, which are kind of team Steve and Dave. They do as many collaborations as Neal and I do. So you kind of have those two worlds coming together, and then Casey is the glue. I love that. I love that Neal and I bring the prog. Dave and Steve bring like the instrumental dregs kind of flavor, but Casey brings this kind of like Radiohead meets Coldplay meets Muse meets U2. He brings in that element that really none of us have in any of our other bands or projects. What can I tell you about the album? We wrote 10 songs, 7 of which were written in the first session at Steve's back in 2016. And then we got together at my place this month and we wrote 3 more. And we also went back to listen to the first 7 to see if we needed to tweak anything, but we didn't. We were happy with everything. So that made 10. I went off to Nashville last week and did all my drums. And at this point, they're being shipped off to the other guys to now work their magic.
That's awesome.
Does that work differently from, say, Neal Morse Band or Transatlantic or any of the other collaborations? Do you spend less time together as a band with Flying Colors because of the multiple schedules, or is it similar?
Well, the process is the same in all cases, whether it be Neal Morse Band, Flying Colors, Transatlantic, or even any of my other bands, Sons of Apollo or Winery Dogs, Metal Allegiance. In all of these cases, we all get together to write and arrange. And sometimes people will come in with snippets and ideas. And then once again, I'll kind of be the gleaner and the arranger. And we all work together and collaborate, putting the stuff together. And then I'll go and record my drums. And along with those drums come some basic tracks as well. And from there, then everybody goes off and does their tracks. And then usually the vocals, get worked on with whoever's singing on the album. But in terms of faster or shorter, the process is the same. But I would say the process is a little longer with Flying Colors, to be honest, because Steve is so incredibly anal, but in an amazing way, in the most complimentary way. Nothing could go through the writing process without going through Steve's ears and fingers. With something like Transatlantic or Neal Morse Band, there are other guys that might just be more passive, and Neal and I just steamroll everybody. But right. Neal and I try to steamroll everybody in Flying Colors to keep it moving, but no, everything has to go through Steve. And if Neal puts out a riff or a progression or something, Steve always has to put twist on it and make a change or make a chord change or put a modulation or a key change. And I think that's what makes these songs so unique and kind of help take them away from the typical stereotypes that people might get if it was only me and Neal just kind of steamrolling everybody.
Yeah. Lastly, before we get into the top 5, I don't want you to give away anything that you don't want to give away, but just in terms of the cruise coming up, have you gotten down to finalizing what your set's going to be and who's playing with you and anything you can spill, or it's all still hush hush?
Yeah, well, first part of the question is, it's completely decided on. The set list is written, the musicians are chosen, everybody's learning their parts and preparing for the cruise. So all that's done and in the works. What can I give away? I mean, I'll just say I've been very fortunate that Cruise to the Edge has given me this platform and given me, they've given me kind of this role each year now where I have a permanent spot on the cruise to kind of do my thing and put together these special shows. My first Cruise to the Edge, I did a MP and Friends tribute to Chris Squire and put together this entire set of Chris's music and Yes's music. with so many of the guys on board, and it was so cool and so unique and such an honor for me to do. Then the next year, I put together my 50th birthday show, and that was so much fun and so unique. And last year, I didn't actually do an MP and Friends show last year because we kind of used that as the premiere for Sons of Apollo. But this year, for 2019, I'm going back to the MP and Friends format. So I'll just say, use your imagination with what I did for my 50th birthday and what I did for the Yes tribute and the Chris Squire tribute. And, you kind of can get an idea of what you're getting. Anytime I've done any of these, they tend to be some of the most special shows of my career. And some of the stuff I have up my sleeve for the next Cruise to the Edge, I think it's going to be just as special.
Yeah, and really, for people that haven't been on the ship before and are on the fence, I mean, you can generally catch Yes or Steve Hackett or some of the bands touring at some point throughout the year. But the stuff that Mike does and, Mike, that you do on these ships, really you don't see.
No, they're aimed to be completely unique experiences, one of a kind, that if you're not on the ship, you're going to be kicking yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, unless anything else, Geoff, that you wanted to ask, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the top 5.
I just always get sore kicking myself, and I'm someday.
Okay, so here we go. So what we're going to do is we left this open to any era of the band, any lineup, whatever. We didn't discuss our choices. I'm sure there'll be some overlapping. There sometimes is. Mike, why don't you go first with your number 5 Yes song?
All right. Can I give a preface?
Yeah, please.
Obviously, I'm a huge Yes fan, and I've loved them since I discovered them in the early 70s. One of the most important bands of my life and career. Huge influence on me. Not only Bill Bruford and Alan White, but also the whole band. Just every one of those guys are a huge inspiration to me. And been very fortunate to have crossed paths with Yes so much through the years. Dream Theater and Yes toured together, 2004. Transatlantic and John Anderson did a whole Yes set on my Progressive Nation cruise. Like I just mentioned, I did a whole Chris Squire Yes tribute set on Cruise to the Edge. So I've had the opportunity to tour with Yes. I've had the opportunity to play so many Yes songs through the years. And, that being said, I just want to thank them for the huge influence they've been on me. So getting into my list, just coincidentally, they kind of go in reverse chronological order. I actually do have a definitive order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but they just so happen to run chronological if you look at them. So if I'm going to run them back from 5 backwards, they happen to coincidentally be reverse chronological. So once I give you the number 5, you'll see where my Yes list ends.
Okay.
And it's from the Drama album, and it's Machine Messiah, the opening track on the Drama album.
Okay.
And what can I say about this? Well, first and foremost, when this came out, I thought it was the heaviest thing I have ever heard from Yes. I never heard Steve Howe have a guitar tone like that. The opening riff to this song was so heavy, and it was like, oh my, what's going on? Is this Yes? And as most longtime Yes fans know, there was a huge period where Yes didn't play any of this material. All those years after Drama, once John Anderson came back, they never played any of this Drama material until John left the band years ago. So for us Yes fans that love the Drama album, and I love the entire album, not just Machine Messiah, but I love every song on the Drama album. It's, to me, one of my favorite Yes albums of all time, probably top 3, maybe top 4. But there was always this gap. So when Dream Theater toured with Yes in 2004, I remember asking, I asked Alan and Steve and Chris, I asked their blessing for Dream Theater to put a little excerpt of Machine Messiah in our set. I thought it would be a great idea to play it, and the Yes fans would love it because they don't normally get to hear it. But of course I wouldn't just do that without asking those guys. So I asked Steve, Alan, and Chris their blessing And of course, they loved the idea. I'm not sure if John was crazy about the idea,
Right.
but those three thought it was the coolest idea ever. And we went ahead and did a little excerpt of it each night in our set. And even at the last show in Mexico, Alan came behind the kit with me because I had that double kit at the time, and he and I played it together, which was so much fun.
Cool. Geoff, you're a big fan of drama, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my preface, I suppose, is that John Anderson was someone I knew through John and Vangelis and through appearing on Mike Oldfield albums. Those were both sort of things that were big, I suppose, in the UK at that time. And I knew he was in a band. And one day I went to my public library where I used to borrow vinyl albums, and I grabbed the 3 Yes albums that I could find, which were the Yes album 90125 and Drama. So I always say, to me, I looked at these 3 albums and went, hang on a minute, there's 2 different drummers, there's 2 different keyboard players, and this guy was on the oldest one and now he's on the newest one, and
right.
all these people change around, which is why for me that was what Yes were about from the start. And so I always get, when you see stuff on the internet of people fighting over the lineups, to me the whole thing right from my first experience of Yes was that, and Drama was one of the first albums that I heard. And again, being in the UK and going, hang on, that's the guys that sang Video Killed the Radio Star, and the album starts with this incredibly heavy track, as Mike said, probably the heaviest thing that Yes have written, which is why, and I won a prize for this, my number 5 is also Machine Messiah.
Oh, wow.
Is it really?
That's incredible.
So, and I just, what he said, basically, if you see what I've written down here, it's practically, I'm channeling Mike here.
That's funny.
That combination of stuff that was very different, things that you can tell were obviously worked up whenever Steve, Chris, and Alan were a 3-piece trying to figure out what to do. And, that riff heavy stuff, and yet the new keyboard sounds that Geoff Downes brought, everything, it's just a great track.
Very cool. Wow, we've never had that, 2 of the same right out of the gate. So that's
I have a feeling we're going to hit at least one of our lists. At least one of our lists is going to be 4 out of 5 the same. I got a feeling.
It's a good shot. It's between the 2 of you, probably more likely. Because I can tell you I don't have Machine Messiah. But yeah, you know what? I think just looking at this, there's just some you can't shy away from. So we'll see what happens. But all right, so I guess my introduction, as I've talked about before, is that I come from learning about Yes from 90125 and then going back. So that's I was a kid in the 80s, and that's when I discovered the band. And for the longest time, I was 10 years old or something. I thought Trevor Rabin was the lead singer because that's what the videos made it look like. So and Trevor Rabin is one of my musical heroes. So I have to go to that era a little bit. So mine is going to be a mix of old and new, I guess, from that angle. But so when I'm trying to go through what Trevor Rabin era songs do I want to pick, that becomes hard because 90125 is an amazing record. I ended up not picking a song from that, which surprises me. But I decided to go with one song that really always was one that stuck out to me, one that I always go back to. And even though the album is not nearly as good, I'm going with a song off Big Generator, Shoot High, Aim Low, which is it's really cool. Yeah, really cool kind of, I don't know, sort of dark kind of song for them. Has a great chorus, just love the whole vibe of it. That was the song that always stuck out for me from that. And 87 at the time, I think right after that, he released his solo record. That was my heavy Trevor Rabin phase. I can't stress. I mean, it was like what I listened to a lot. So, Big Generator. I listened to the whole album just the other day to try and review some of these things. That album gets, I don't know, it gets kind kind of pushed aside as like the lesser album. I really don't think it's bad.
I love it.
I don't think it's a bad album. But Shoot High, Aim Low. So that's where I'm going with my first pick.
Seeing the guns and the faces, we looked around the open shore, waiting for something. Shoot high, break low. Aim high, shoot low. Break high, let go. Shoot high, aim
I'm surprised. I mean, maybe you'll get to it, but to me, the quintessential Trevor Rabin Yes song would be Changes. That's what I would think of immediately when I think of him. But also, what was it, Endless Dream from Talk? Is that
That's another good one.
Yeah,
Those were the two. I mean, I had, yeah, that's on my short list of the Trevor Rabin songs. Certainly Changes, but you know, I tend to try and not go with like the obvious hit ones if I can help it. I don't know. I'm sort of like that. But
I remember when the Talk album came out. Here's a funny Dream Theater reference. When the Talk album came out in '94, and either we had just put out Awake or we were done with Awake and we were waiting for it to come out. And then here comes Yes with this trilogy that starts with an instrumental, crazy instrumental, then does like a 10-minute epic in the middle, and then closes with an acoustic song. And that was the exact formula we just did with A Mind Beside Itself with the Rodomania Voices and Silent Man. So we were like, oh my God, they're either ripping us off or they just totally beat us to the punch. I can't remember which came out first, but I love that album as well. Talk to Me was my last favorite, like real favorite Yes album.
Yeah, I think that's I think for most of us that's probably true.
If we had been doing this last night, my number 5 would have been Endless Dream, and it was only that I actually switched it out for Machine Messiah. Again, I think when you look at the history of the band, it's really the only album that John Anderson and Trevor Rabin kind of truly collaborated on. I think a lot of the time it was Rabin, and the other two albums, it was Rabin leading the way. But the thing that I love about Shoot High, Aim Low is that kind of, you know, the it's not a duet, but the counterpoint vocal that they do on it, you know, the blue sedan and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they did the counterpoint where they sing back and forth. It's that's good stuff. All right, Mike, you're number 4.
All right, once again, I'm just coincidentally falling in reverse chronological time. So number 4 for me is The Gates of Delirium from Relayer. And to me, Relayer was well, first of all, it was a great album in terms of introducing a new sound with Patrick Moraz in the band. But it went kind of back to the close to the edge formula of just having like 3 or 4 tracks as opposed to, you know, what Topographic was. And Gates of Delirium, I think, is one of those songs that just really captured the band's virtuoso playing, the incredible abstract orchestration and arrangements. But I think it was kind of the more natural the more natural follow-up to Close to the Edge than Topographic was. And it also contains you know, the coda at the end with Soon, which is one of the most beautiful things in the entire Yes catalog.
Stand and fight, we do consider reminded of, and in a pact between us, let's see as we go. And right there, emotion to feels in bits of honor. Stand the marchers, soaring talents, peaceful lives will not deliver freedom. Right till we know, destroy oppression.
again, it was for me. Relayer was always one of the more difficult albums to get into. But I can remember on the symphonic tour where they brought out Gates of Delirium again, and seeing that show, and one of those moments where you go, well, all right, now I get this now. When you see it, performed live and all that stuff they were doing with the kettle drums and all that kind of stuff, it was amazing.
Mike, do you get a chance to see them when they play on the ship? Is that, or so, the timing sometimes rarely works out with all the stuff all the bands are doing, and right? I mean,
yeah. I always try to make a point to see them once every cruise. I mean, even before the cruises, I would always make a point to try to see them once every tour. And I've seen them pretty much on every tour and every evolution since the 90125 tour. That was the first tour I saw them live. But I've seen them pretty much on every tour and every cruise since then. To me, my favorite Yes tour by miles was the Union tour in 91. Just to see all 8 of them up there together was mind-blowing. And I remember going to see that show like 3 times. Just I was so blown away by it. And then I did get to see the Yes 50th anniversary show this past summer in Philly, which was almost a bit of a Union experience as well, because I think at one point they had 10 members up there. I mean, the Union tour had 8 of them, but this 50th anniversary show I saw had at least 10 of them. So, yeah, I still catch them each and every time whenever I can. So I've been able to see all the different incarnations and lineups and different set lists. And I remember seeing that symphonic tour where they did the Gates of Delirium. Actually, it was I was on tour with Transatlantic. It was 2001 on the Bridge Across Forever tour. And we had a night off in Germany. I think might have been Frankfurt, I think. And Alan and Chris invited us out. We went to see the show. All of us, myself, Neal, Pete, Roina, and Daniel. And we sat right on the side of the stage. And I remember being blown away by Gates of Delirium that night.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Geoff, you're number 4.
Okay, number 4. So I'm sticking at this point with my original trilogy of Yes albums. So I'm going to the Yes album and Starship Trooper. And of course, that was the album that brought Steve Howe into the band. And it's a song that, if you look at the credits, I think this is right. The opening part is an Anderson piece. The middle bit, you've got Steve Howe doing his acoustic picky country type thing, and then you have that amazing ending of Wurm, I think is the correct pronunciation, with German friends, with the panning crazy guitar solo, and a sound that was very, very different from what had gone before. And the first steps towards a new direction where a band member joined and really made a significant difference to what the band were doing. And of course, it's still a staple of their live show. It's still one of the greatest show closers. Big ending.
Sister Bluebird, flying high above, shining wings over to the sun. Hide the mysteries of life on your way. Though you've seen them, please don't say a word.
For me, that song always reminds me of the cruise you get where you guys played with John Anderson, and you did that set and you closed that out with him. Yeah. And there's like 1,000 people on stage all playing the ending of that song.
Totally.
That was so insane and epic. But yeah, that's one of the all-time classics for sure. Great song. Okay, I'm gonna go my number 4. I'm jumping around. This is one of the classic songs, title track from Going for the One. Yeah, Going for the One song. And what's surprising about this song for me is that it's listed as a John Anderson piece by himself, which you wouldn't think so, because it's really, one of the more upbeat kind of rockin' songs the band did, very guitar driven. Yeah. And good on him for writing something like that. But that song is always an interesting one for me. I love the ending where it just continues to build, and those backing vocals are there, and the crazy playing, and just phenomenal. Just one of my all-time favorites.
I should treat
Good call. It's a great tune. I mean, I hate that, like, if you look at my list, I've already passed the Going for the One album off my list, which is a shame because Going for the One, the track is great. I love Parallels is also great. Awaken I'm not the biggest Awaken fan. To me, it's a little drawn out, but I really do love that whole album. It's a great, great album.
Yeah. I thought Awaken for sure might be one that you went through, but yeah, I sort of have that feeling too with Awaken. I love the song, but I wish it's a couple minutes shorter. Yeah, just one of those things for me.
Which is something you never hear from Prog fans.
Yeah, that's right.
The other thing I love, Going for the One, the brilliant example of Chris Squire doing that kind of strange counterpoint. Again, the vocal thing that he's doing, where he's singing something completely different, but yeah, it's so complementary to what John is singing for what's quite a straight ahead song. And there's YouTube, there's video of the making of the recording of that, and Chris is singing this stuff that's really, really, really kind of not the natural sort of thing that you would expect someone to be singing along with what John Anderson's singing, but it's a great tune.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, Mike, you're number 3.
Well, here we go. This is it's unfathomable to me that this would even not be number 1, but I don't know. The top 3 here is so tough for me. But number 3, Close to the Edge, the song, the title track. On some days I might call that number 1. Definitely days would call it number 2. But when I put this list out, it ended up at number 3. And to me, it's the quintessential Prog sidelong epic. I mean, at that point, Genesis was doing them. Genesis had Supper's Ready, and Pink Floyd had Echoes and Adam Hart Mother. And then here come Yes with theirs. And it's everything about the Close to the Edge album is perfection to me. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. And I very easily could have made the 1, 2, and 3 spots the entire Close to the Edge album right here. But I
right.
I had to really go out of my way to not do that, to give some other albums representation. Yeah. So I purposely left one of them off of this list. But any of those 3 songs are masterpieces. And Close to the Edge, to me, just epitomizes the unbelievable musicianship that was going on with that band. That lineup was just an all-star band. Chris Squire, Bill Bruford, Steve Howe, Rick Wakeman, John Anderson. You don't get a stronger pound-for-pound lineup than that. And I mean, I'll not to give away any spoilers, but pretty much the rest of my list is that lineup and comes from those albums. And Close to the Edge is probably the quintessential sidelong epic.
How they put all those parts together on that title song is I don't know how you write that. I really don't. It's amazing.
It's also one of the, I know that Bruford said once we'd done that, he said, I just went, I don't know what else we can do. I just don't know
right.
what else we can do as a band, and that was why he moved on to do something different. And it's good to know when to quit, I suppose.
Yeah. All right, Geoff, number 3.
Number 3, yeah. I mean, I think Roie, you and I said, last night you could almost do this top 5 from 2 albums, and I too tried to do a track from at least from 5 different albums. Number 3, Heart of the Sunrise. The Yes album from before Starship Trooper. Then they bring in Rick, and you've got a Mellotron, you've got a Moog, the piano, the organ. You have a whole array of new sounds that are bringing a complete, new dynamic to what the band is doing and what they're capable of doing. And again, to me, just a quintessential prog track. Mike was talking earlier on about working on something like The Great Adventure, and the whole process of themes from earlier in the song reappearing later on. Recapitulation, I think, is the correct musical term for that?
You learn something new every time.
Yeah, but you know that is, again, to me, it's a prog blueprint within a song, and it's it's got everything that's great about Yes, from the individual musicianship to the compositional stuff to the arrangement. It's all there in 8 or 9 minutes.
Yeah, agreed.
Love comes to you, and then after, dream on to the heart of the sunrise. You're lost on a wave that you're dreaming. Dream on to the heart of the sunrise. Sharp distance. How can the wind with its arms all around me? Sharp distance. How can the wind with so many around me? I feel lost in the city.
I'm gonna pass because I might have more to say on it later. Foreshadowing. Okay, so like I said, I'm jumping around on mine, no particular timeline order, and I am including Trevor Rabin era stuff. So I hope I don't get too much flack for this one, but I'm going back to the Rabin era, and this song for me epitomizes that era for me and what I like about what he brought to the band and how he made it that sort of 80s polished metal vibe that I kind of have a soft spot for, and it's Lift Me Up from Union. And I love the opening guitar riff, that kind of shredding thing. It has that 80s kind of big production, that massive production, and I love the chorus, love the whole hook. I mean, this is one of my all-time favorite Yes songs. It's not very quintessential Yes, fair enough, but it's more a Trevor Rabin solo song that they just threw on Union, I think. But one I had to give some props to because it's one that I always still really loved. And I think, again, I'll say I don't think Union's a terrible record. I mean, it's not the most consistent album. Kind of goes all over the place, but there's a lot of really good songs on there, and this one was always my favorite.
What to do? I find it hard to know. I want to turn my life around. Lift me up and turn me over. Lead me on into the door. Take me to the highest mountain. Tie me up, love in a storm. Have you decided on my fortune? Facing the future in your eyes. With your imperial behavior, we fight amidst the battle cry. Open doors, they may be closed to me. The fire's still burning in my heart.
I think the Trevor Rabin era stuff doesn't get enough credit for its subtle nuances that are really progressive. And I don't think I even fully appreciated it till I did the Chris Squire tribute a few years ago, because the Yes guys kind of asked me to stay away from the stuff that they were doing in their set already. So that kind of took away, the Yes album and Drama, and took all those off the table for me. So I kind of had to focus a little bit more on the 80s Yes. And at first I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. But once we started rehearsing the stuff, like songs like Changes and City of Love, and we did what was it, Cinema, the instrumental before Hold On.
Yeah.
I mean, so that stuff is really more complicated than you think. The nuances in the arrangements and the instrumentation is subtle, but really just as as any of the 70s stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree, absolutely. He's great musician.
I loved the Union album when it came out, and again, that a lot of this is pre-internet. We didn't know a lot of the history of what was happening with the band. They're just an album just appeared, and it was great, and it was interesting to hear the combinations. That song to me was always a standout, and Miracle of Life, that's also on that album, is another really sort of proggy influenced song too.
Yeah, it's weird. I agree, because when you first got that album, you go, oh, how cool. They all got together and made an album, and you have no idea what the real story is. Now you go back and you read, and you realize they all hated the idea.
Well, it was 2 different albums put together. Yeah, basically the Big Generator Band, and you had the Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe Band, and put it all together.
Yeah,
and I was a huge, I should give a honorable mention to the Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe album. I loved that album when it came out. It was a big influence on me and the guys in Dream Theater when it came out in 88 or 9, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's an album I love, although I think with time, the drum sound on it, I find it quite hard to listen to. It sort of jars a little bit. But
I can see that.
You can remix that.
But I remember seeing that tour as well with Tony Levin on bass, and coming off of Big Generator, and it was like, wow. Well, that was as close as we got in the 80s to the classic lineup, But it was just weird to not have Chris part of it.
Yeah.
But Tony Levin was a great substitute. He did great.
Yeah.
But again, probably one of the last tours where they sort of played nearly the whole album. I think before maybe they got into feeling that they had 80% of the set needed to be stuff from way back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mike, you're number 2.
Once again, have to get something else off the Close to the Edge album, and You and I is to me one of the greatest songs ever written by any band. It's in my top 10 of all time songs from anybody. It was tough putting it before Close to the Edge, because Close to the Edge is more, like I said before, the quintessential prog epic. But And You and I is just so beautiful. More than anything else, it's a beautiful, beautiful song. And I love the live version. I tend to gravitate towards the Yes Songs version, which begins with the big Mellotron theme and everything, because I think that's the part, I get goosebumps when I hear that theme. And it was a great idea for them to open the live version with that theme before getting into the whole acoustic bit. It's a perfectly written and executed song, and I had the honor of covering it with Transatlantic, and even cooler, playing it with Transatlantic and John Anderson on the Progressive Nation cruise. That was one of those moments that will forever be a highlight of my life and career. Yeah, playing that opening theme and then hitting it again at the end. Incredible.
And you and I climb over the sea to the valley. And you and I reach out for reasons to call.
Originally, because Transatlantic had just covered And You and I, so when I started talking to John about doing this Yes set, I figured, okay, well, we got to do And You and I. We're a third of the way there. Why don't we just do the whole Close to the Edge album, and that would be our set? And he was like, that's just too complicated. I don't want to get into, Close to the Edge is a lot of work, and I'd rather keep it simple. Let's just stick with the simple stuff. We'll do Starship Trooper. We'll do Long Distance Run Around and keep it simple. It's like, all right, well, okay, sure. And then a couple of days later, I get a phone call from him, and he says, well, I just had an epiphany. What do you think about the idea of doing the entire side one of Tales from Topographic Oceans. So we went off the complete opposite deep end. He went from wanting to dial it in and do the simple stuff to now, like, you know, getting into this one of the most complex pieces of music I've ever had to learn in my life. And we did it. We spent at least an hour at every sound check throughout the transatlantic tour learning that piece and rehearsing it. And it was a huge undertaking, not because the playing is so hard, but that arrangement is so unorthodox. And it wasn't until we got into rehearsals with John on the ship where he was like conducting things that it made sense. And I was like, oh, now I get it. You know, he's kind of conducting the transitions. But before we even did it in rehearsal, John was like, maybe we shouldn't do that. And it's like, what, are you kidding me? We just spent like the last month learning this piece. We are doing it. You are not backing out now. So yeah, we did it. So I will say, playing that, you know, that was a monumental, mammoth, epic cover. But coming back to my list, and You and I, for me, was the goosebumps moments for myself.
Again, watching that performance that night, it was the last night of the cruise. For you, one of the highlights. Playing it, for me, one of my all-time greatest things I've ever seen. That night was awesome. Geoff, we're at your number 2, right? Yeah.
Yeah, number two. I was biting my tongue earlier on while the two of you sat and told me that Awaken needed to be trimmed by a few being too long. Awaken is my number 2. And again, I think probably I'm a big fan of Relayer, but I think that Rick coming back to the band for that album, it perhaps reined in some of the sort of jazz fusion direction that they were maybe taking with Patrick Moraz, and you know, an album that sounds like a true full band collaboration. And I remember I think it was maybe Sirius, the Yes did a kind of talk through how we wrote this song and how all the different bits came together, from Steve Howe having the cycle of chords that, you know, goes round and round and round, to them getting the church organ in Veve and recording it down the high quality telephone lines in the studio. So with Rick and John, with the pipe organ and the harp, and the rest of the guys in the studio, and that brilliant guitar solo, the choir, it's got, you know, the full, it's got the full works going on. To me, it's a great song, and I've seen them play it live a couple of times, and just one of those great moments. I love the version that they, I didn't see the tour, but I've seen some of the recordings of the Union tour with the extra band members there, and again, you know, a huge sound of that. So Awaken, it was vying for my number 1 slot, and it's definitely a solid number 2.
Well, good. I know most Yes fans consider it probably in the top 5, 6, 7 Yes songs. For many, you hear a lot. It's their favorite. So glad it has some representation on our list here for sure. It's a great song. We're just nitpicking just because. Okay, so my number 2, I'm going to end up going a little bit more, I guess, traditional and stuff that has already been talked about. But again, I felt like there's just a couple of songs that you can't leave out under any circumstance. So my number 2 is Close to the Edge. Just a masterpiece. You know, I tried to find other songs that I may want to put in because I figured it might be on the list some by somebody, but I just it's like you said, quintessential Yes. It's everything. It's the blueprint to what every band that ever came after is doing, and just a phenomenal work of art, of genius. So that's my number 2 is the title track.
Yeah, can't argue with that for all the reasons I already said. Yeah.
Not much more to say, right?
No, I mean it's almost hard to not make it number 1 for me, at least. It's on certain days it is number 1.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's see your number 1. I think maybe we have a clue based on what you said, but let's see what it is.
It's got to be Heart of the Sunrise. I think it's maybe the quintessential prog song ever. It is, like Geoff already said, it was kind of the blueprint, and you kind of alluded to that with Close to the Edge as well, but I think Heart of the Sunrise being the first one written,
right.
It really set the blueprint for how progressive music could be written. And the incredible story is that they wrote that and Roundabout in Rick Wakeman's very first rehearsal with the band. At least that's how, the folklore... That's the story as has been told. But Rick's first rehearsal, they wrote pretty much Roundabout and Heart of the Sunrise in one sitting, which is ridiculous. But Heart of the Sunrise, it's got all the themes, the nuances, the intricacies, the themes coming back and being restated and reprised, and the ups and the downs, and it's beautiful and it's technical, and surprisingly, it clocks in under 10 minutes, I believe. One of those rare cases where you did get everything in the kitchen sink in under 10 minutes. And it's, to me, the greatest Yes song ever written.
Have you ever covered it, Mike?
I did. I covered it with Dream Theater, believe it or not. It was a one-off. Back in the early 2000s, obviously we were doing the full albums, but then I also got into this idea of just doing one-off songs in certain places. We played San Francisco, so I put in a Journey song. Or we played London, and I put in a Queen song or whatever. And Heart of the Sunrise was one of those one-off covers we did. I can't remember offhand which city we played it in. Oh, I think it was Paris, now that I think about it. Randomly Paris, just because it was a big major city, and we were at the Zenith, and I wanted to do something special. And yeah, we covered it once, and we put it out on one of the It's a Jam official bootlegs, one of the uncovered compilation discs. And that's the only time I had covered it.
I don't think I've heard that. That must be somewhere.
Yeah, it's out there.
You've talked about a few of the songs you've covered. What's the, if you had to pick one for the next cruise or for the next cover show, what's the Yes song you haven't covered yet?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at this list here. I did Heart of the Sunrise with Dream Theater. I did And You and I with Transatlantic. I did Machine Messiah with Dream Theater, at least a bit of it. So, I mean, obviously the glaring one here is that I have yet to cover Close to the Edge, the song, which is pretty surprising. So I guess that's still the one that's waiting to be covered. But my Yes list, between the John Anderson show and the Chris Squire show, I did get to bang out some cool ones on the Chris Squire show. Like I always wanted to do, No Opportunity Necessary, No Experience Needed. So we got to do that there. Right. We got to do Every Little Thing, which was fun, being both a Beatles and a Yes fan. So I would say Close to the Edge, or maybe America, the Yes version of America is another one that would be fun to cover someday. So I guess those are a couple that are still waiting in the wings.
And dream lineup to cover Close to the Edge. Go.
Well, it'd have to be Transatlantic or Neal Morse Band. I think those are the two bands that are most rooted in this real traditional prog stuff. So that that would be the right place for it.
Yeah, totally. Cool. All right, Geoff, let's see what you got. Your big number one.
Number one, well, yeah, this may not come as a surprise, having talked about it twice. Close to the Edge. It's my number one. I actually just this year read there's been an entire book written about the recording of that album, which is
I have that book. Yeah,
I would say a really good music book is one that makes you listen to the music in a different way. And one of the things I love that it says about that book was that once they'd finished, they started off recording all of these bits, putting them together. Once they finished it, they actually had to learn how to play it because it had never been done from start to finish.
That's welcome to my world. That's the way it's been for my last 40 albums. That's the norm these days, I think.
Yeah. And playing gigs, and driving to a gig in Scotland, coming back down, having to set it up and do it all over again. Back in the day, look, you've already said enough about it for me to say that's
so that song has the a 1, a 2, and a 3 slot on this list, which is not too bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, I figured as much.
In charge of who is there in charge of me? Do I look on blindly and say I see the way? The truth is written all along the page. How old will I be before I come of age? For you, I get up, I get down, I get up, I get down, I get up, I get
My number one is going to make it a trio for a second song. So my number one is also Heart of the Sunrise. So
Wow. That's 2 number ones, though.
that's 2 number ones.
Wow.
So again, not very surprising.
Does that mean you win a cabin in the cruise? No.
That's right. So yeah, look, this was always the one that I think is, like you said, it sort of covers everything. What I like about it for me is when you get to see it live, it just gives you chills. The epic ending of it, it's just so awesome, and that's what always stands out to me. There's a couple of classic Prog songs that when I watch on a live DVD or happen to be watching live at a show, that just make me go nuts every time. And this is one of them. I think the other one is probably Musical Box by Genesis. When every time I see Steve Hackett perform it, I can't even believe how awesome it is. And so it's up there in one of those sort of type of songs for me.
To me, the surprising omission is Siberian Khatru, and it took everything in my power to not put it in there. Actually, there's a few surprising ones. None of us put Roundabout.
I didn't think Roundabout would make it. That's great because
that's like the Tom Sawyer for Yes,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
but still, there's no denying its greatness. And also, Yours Is No Disgrace is a surprising omission.
Yeah, I almost did Siberian Khatru instead of Close to the Edge. That was a close call, just because I thought someone else might have Close to the Edge. But in my reevaluating, I made the last minute change. But yeah, I agree. We did get a Yes album song in here, Starship Trooper, Geoff. So thank you for that. We didn't leave that out.
I think the other thing, it's been mentioned already, and I actually forgot to mention this when I was talking about Starship Trooper, but actually, Yes songs itself, in many cases, I think the versions on that album are really the definitive versions of a lot of these songs. Certainly, Starship Trooper has a big Wakeman solo in it, and I actually recently dug out my vinyl of Yes songs and put on Close to the Edge, and I actually had to check that the speed was right because it'd been so long since I'd listened to it. They play that at such a rate, I think their chops at that stage were just absolutely incredible.
But it should be mentioned the big difference is that Yes songs had Alan playing the song, other than Perpetual Change, which was Bruford. And to me, that was a huge difference. And I love Alan, and I love the rock groove that he brought to the band. But to me, when I think of, to me, the Holy Trinity is Yes album, Fragile, and Close to the Edge. And to me, all three of those albums was Bruford, a huge part of that equation, and that sound and that style. So that's the only reason I tend to go to the studio versions as opposed to the live versions. And that's with all due respect and love to Alan, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, before we let you go, actually, we should let you talk about your Percussive Nation event coming up. Tell people about that who maybe haven't heard, maybe they're not following on Facebook, but that seems like a pretty awesome event.
Yeah, that's absolutely the next big thing for me after Cruise to the Edge. And I just love these kind of events. And this is another great example of, getting an incredible roster together. And I did 2 music camps with the Winery Dogs back in, I think it was 2014 and 15, I think. And we did these music camps, and they were a lot of fun. But in those cases, they were actually on campgrounds, in cabins and stuff. This one is Percussive Nation 2019, but it's going to be at a resort in Scottsdale, Arizona. So it's not a camp like you're in the woods. You're going to be at a beautiful resort with swimming pools and all kinds of, restaurants. And it's going to be a great getaway for a week, a great summer vacation. But it's a music camp. It's not just a drum camp. The blueprint and the basis is based on drummers. You have myself, Greg Bissonette, Simon Phillips, and Blake Richardson from Between the Buried and Me. So the foundation is rooted in drummers, but then we have these great guitar players and bass players as well. We have Alex Skolnick from Testament on guitar, the great Tony McAlpine, Chris Broderick, who used to be in Megadeth. And then in bass world, we have, of course, 2 of my fellow rhythm section players, Billy Sheehan and Dave LaRue. So it's really a combination of drums, guitar, bass. You have rock, metal, fusion, prog, and you could imagine all of the different lineup configurations that's going to happen. I mean, I play with Dave in Flying Colors. I play with Billy in Winery Dogs and Sons of Apollo. I play with Alex in Metal Allegiance. So there's all these different combinations of players. The possibilities are endless. And all day and all night, you get to go to workshops and clinics and classes, and it's very interactive. It's not just going to be the students sitting there watching us. I mean, the students are going to be a part of it, and they get to jam with us and play with us. And you get basically to live, breathe, and eat, together for 4 days, all under, this giant roof. And it's a lot of fun. We did it with the Winery Dog Camp. And it ended up being a great, great time, no matter what instrument you play, no matter what level you're at, even if you don't play at all, even if you're just a fan and you just want to attend and be able to witness, a really cool, intimate experience. It's going to be an amazing event.
It sounds awesome.
Yeah.
another one of these things to get people out to. But I mean, you get closer than ever now to some of these music legends like yourself and all the guys you're talking about with all these kind of events at Morse Fest and Cruise to the Edge and whatever. And it's awesome.
Exactly.
I mean, it's for
and they also they create a bit of a family. Like, I know everybody that goes to Morse Fest each year, they all know each other. They created a little community. Same thing with the dog camps when we did that. These people were jamming together and living together and eating their meals together. So when you leave after a couple of days, you feel like, you're leaving summer camp and saying goodbye to friends. And this camp will be very much the same.
Yeah. Morse Fest has been that for Geoff and myself and a lot of the guys that we've met on there, where we've all become really close friends, and it's an added bonus of one of these type of events for sure. I always wanted to ask you one more question. When is there going to be a just an album or a band called Portnoy, where it's just, that's it, it's your thing, guest singers, your band? When is that happening?
I've thought about it for years. I just haven't had a chance. Like, literally, for 8 years now since I left Dream Theater, my plate has been so full. I haven't had a break. I went right from Dream Theater into Flying Colors and Adrenaline Mob and working with John Sykes and, continuing to work with Neal and Transatlantic. And then came Winery Dogs, and then came Sons of Apollo, and then came Metal Allegiance and Twisted Sister. And I haven't had a chance to breathe. Yeah. And I would love to do it. I have sitting in my phone for years now a note, okay, one of these days this will be my solo album. And my dream was to do a 4-sided album where each side was a different style. One side I could do like a power pop thing, collaborating with like Damon Fox from Big Elf or Mark Michael from Pillbugs, Jason Faulkner or Roger Manning, tap into that on one side. Then another side I could do a thrash thing with all my Metal Allegiance friends. And then another side I could do a prog metal thing. That's my idea of doing this thing where I could collaborate with all these different friends, but yet ultimately, control the whole thing, maybe even sing on a lot of it. But I haven't had a chance. I really, and it doesn't seem like the train is slowing down any point soon for me to jump off. So I don't know. It's maybe just one of those retirement dreams that, maybe someday down the road. But I mean, A Shattered Fortress gave me a little taste of having my band and being the leader and running the show and kind of being the focus. And that was fun. I loved doing that Shattered Fortress, and I loved revisiting the Dream Theater material. So I got a bit of a taste of a quote unquote Portnoy show or tour with that. But once again, I have 6 other bands of guys that are counting on me, for their schedules and their income. So I can't exactly just stop.
True. Yeah. Well,
and Mike, are you a George Harrison who has a folder full of songs or stuff that you've written that kind of hasn't found a home, or do you write specifically for what you're doing at the time?
I never ever write on my own. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a collaborator first and foremost, and it was even that way in Dream Theater. In Dream Theater, I wrote a lot of the lyrics, and with that came writing a lot of vocal melodies and vocal parts. And I've done a little bit of that since Dream Theater, but for the most part, my assets, my strength is that of a collaborator, a co-producer, a co-writer, and every one of the bands I'm with, that's my role. But I'm not the sort that have ideas. Every once in a while, I'll hum a riff or a pattern or a melody into my phone, and then they'll get utilized somewhere. But for the most part, my creative juices get going when I'm sitting in a room with Bumblefoot and Billy Sheehan and Derek, or if I'm sitting in a room with Neal and Eric and Bill and Randy, or if I'm sitting in a room with Casey and Dave and Steve, or if I'm sitting in a room with Alex Skolnick and Dave Ellefson. In all these cases, it's my collaborators and the guys I write with. That's what energizes me and gets me inspired, and that's where the ideas start to flow from.
Yeah. Well, someone's got to be the puppet master with all these things, and it seems like they all say, whenever I interview anybody, and we talk about, well, how'd you come up with the order, or how'd you come up with this or that for the album? They always go, well, we just give it to Mike.
It's my thing. I mean, it's just, I guess, being a music lover like you guys, I'm really OCD and excited and pumped up. And, I get very, very, anal with organizing all of those things, from the music to the sequence to the production and to the artwork to the merch. Just, that's always been my thing, all these years.
Awesome. Well, look, man, thanks again. It's always fun. We love having you do this. Thank you so much for being a huge part of what the Prog Report does, and
thank you.
And
Thanks
everything. We love having you. And man, everything you have coming down is awesome. Neal Morse Band Great Adventure comes out January 25th, and it's another just insane masterpiece. And of course, Cruise to the Edge coming up, and everything after that. So
can't wait.
Thanks, guys, and happy holidays to you. Merry Christmas and all that, and we'll see you soon.
Same to you guys. See ya.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.